Order.
Sounds good. Roll call. Amagashi. Clary.
Here.
Gorman. Kraus. T. Mertens. Perry.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Wofford. Great, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of December 14th?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Yep. Second.
For that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public appearances for non-agenda items.
No one in the chamber, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Resolutions and ordinances.
We have none.
Okay. So the first presentation we have tonight is by Mr. Ted Macdom. Nice to see you. I've never met you before, but I've seen your name on a lot of different projects. And he's going to be talking about the Gorman & Company rent-to-own project. Yeah, I think, do you have a presentation? Are we going to be advancing some slides?
I think someone is going to show some slides. I think Brian was. There we go. Yep.
Okay, there we go. Well, we'll turn it over to you, Ted. Thanks for being here.
Hang on.
Sure. So,
Hang on a second, Ted. I'm having a technical problem here. Stand by.
And maybe you could just say a few words about who you are in case everybody doesn't know you. And
sure. Of course, Mallory invited me to speak today. We were going to talk about our single family owner initiative program, and really, we mostly do rentals. What we've tried to accomplish, and this is primarily in Milwaukee, we haven't done it in any other city, but we thought maybe this was a launching point for discussion for you guys in some way, shape, or form. We can discuss it after the presentation, but I'll just give you a real quick overview. We've done 10 phases of this type of program in Milwaukee. And the reason we've done so many is because they have so many of these kind of blighted single family homes built in the early 1900s as kind of workforce housing, people, walking to work to the factories in these, what were amazing neighborhoods at the time, primarily African-American neighborhoods that were close together, urban infill. And we use the WIDA tax credit program. It's a low-income housing tax credit program that allows us to put in about $180,000 into each home as a rehab. Also, it costs us about $200,000. Now, with the escalating lumber prices, I'm sure that's more like $225,000 today. But our latest phase, it was $200,000 to build a home. So it's pretty much the same to overhaul a home for a rehab or build a new home. And we'll take either vacant lots or existing blighted homes. And with the tax credit, it subsidizes, when we sell them to a bank, it subsidizes our construction costs. So we have low debt on these projects, which allow us to charge less rent for lower income individuals. We have to target certain incomes, which are on the average about 60% of the county median income. Usually in like Dane County, that would be your about $30,000 for an individual and about $55,000 to $60,000 for a family of four. Yeah. That's about the income that we target. And it has to be rental, which is kind of a bad part of the program, I think. I think this should be sped up, but per IRS regulations, these tax credit projects have to be rentals for 15 years. And at the end of the 15th year, they all can be purchased by the person who is living, the family that's living in the home, for the debt that's outstanding. So just to give you an example, real 50,000 foot view, say we spend $200,000 on a home and the tax credits purchased by, say, Chase Bank, a lot of times they'll purchase our tax credits. We'll apply those proceeds to the cost of construction, and let's say you get a debt of about $100,000 per home. In the 15 years, we would pay down that debt per home to about $30,000. And then at the end of the 15th year, that family that's in there would be able to purchase that home for $30,000. And let's just say, well, we've done some appraisals in this area. Unfortunately, the housing stock in the north side of Milwaukee hasn't really appreciated, so it's actually depreciated since 2009. And so these homes are probably worth about $80,000. But as you can see, if the debt's $30,000 and it appraises to 80, you have a $50,000 equity that this person can realize in year 15, which is just a monumental type of asset for this individual or family. And what's great about it is their rent over that 15-year period is about $1,000 to rent a 3 to 4 bedroom home. And then, as you can imagine, if you get a home, single family mortgage, purchase the home at $30,000, their payment all in is $350. They just put $700 in their pocket as disposable income, and they own their house. I mean, it's a fabulous story. We're doing the first round of these coming online 2022 is when we're going to start. Probably January 1st, 2023 is really when it's going to happen. That's at the end of the 15-year cycle. And all 30 of our first phases that we did, which were new build construction, which look exactly like it's on the cover here, all of those will come online at one time in one neighborhood called Metcalf Park for home ownership. So what's interesting about the program is about the 10th year of the program, even though I think 15 years is too long, around the 10th year of the program, the resident really sees the light at the end of the tunnel and nobody moves. So if you talk about neighborhood stabilization, there you go. And after the 10th year, I literally think in 30 homes, I looked at the occupancy reports. I think we lost 3 or 4 tenants in 5 years. Everyone else was hanging on for the 15th year. And at the end of 15 years, we will then sell all of these homes to every single renter family who wants to purchase them. They have an option not to, but everyone's going to take the option and receive that $50,000 equity. And then for that neighborhood, 30 homes in about a 6-block radius become home ownership in that neighborhood, which is just a game changer in terms of stakeholders, wanting to make their neighborhood better. So that's the program we have. We've done 10 phases. So we do about 30 to 50 units a phase. So, we've got a good portfolio in Milwaukee, and every year we'll have a new phase come on to home ownership. So after this first one, so really good program, and could be installed in any type of municipality as a affordable home ownership program. The one thing that we have in Milwaukee, which a lot of municipalities do not have, is a vacant lot, which is an urban infill that has sewer and water already to it with a street, or a blighted home that has sewer and water and a home that we rehab. Again, about $180,000 to $200,000 for each of those to become the standard of what we'd want to do with the WIDA tax credit. But that's pretty much the program that exists out there, and it really does provide either a new neighborhood that you were going to want to populate with some new homes, or an existing neighborhood with urban infill. It really gives a spark to the neighborhood.
Ted, this is Brian Schimming.
Thanks for that overview, Ted. I'm sorry, Brian, did you want to?
No, I was just going to mention, part of the thing with Milwaukee too, or with a lot of larger urban areas, is, to your point, Ted, you have vacant lots, and Milwaukee has hundreds and hundreds of vacant lots
Right.
or has opportunity. They should be vacant lots, to be honest with you, because there's just, you know better than anybody, Ted, and we've all toured those areas a lot. At Metcalf Park, there was a lot of focus on Metcalf Park after the demonstrations up there, and you had, there's a lot of stress in that neighborhood. I was there like 3 days afterwards. So, other than the vacant lots, were there homes there or structures there that the city was going, you can have them for $1, or I'm trying to remember how most of those came together.
Yep. Yeah, Brian, that's a great point. So the difference between, say, a Fitchburg or Milwaukee is that, like you hit on the head. For me to take these vacant homes that are blighted, that either slumlords rent out or are vacant, is a gift to the city. I mean, either they got to tear them down for $15,000, I take them for $1, and the vacant lots are previously demoed homes that the city took down and give to me for $1. So all of it's for $1 versus Fitchburg, where if you're going to do a new subdivision or any other municipality, you guys don't have the blight that Milwaukee has. That's a given. But let's say you wanted to do this program in a new neighborhood, which would be very interesting. That really to make the deal work, because in this program, land is toxic.
Yeah.
It really just creates a gap for the project. The city really would have to pretty much, you could pay a little bit, I think. I think the developer could pay a little bit, but the land would have to be a nominal value, either an existing road, maybe it's a bankrupt subdivision from 2009 that didn't go anywhere and you're having trouble kind of upstarting it. That could be a possible scenario. But the land would not, you can't have a $2 million land with the developer putting in the roads and the sewer and all that. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So if you did get the land, are you still saying that even in Dane County, you could build that home for $200,000?
Yeah, it might be, Olivia, it might be a little bit more now just because labor and everything skyrocketed. I bet it's $225,000, that exact same house today. This is probably our latest phase was started 2 years ago, and it's just kind of finishing up now. It takes about 18 months to get them all built. I'd say right now it's probably $225,000, but rents went up too. So, maybe you're in the ball game,
Right. And do you, Milwaukee's need in this area is so much more significant than Dane County, although Dane County obviously has a significant need for affordable housing of all kinds. But it's possible municipality might have some land, but it almost seems like a scattered site approach might be something that might be better, because if some community has 3 houses, three sites, or a few tear downs, and then another does, is that possible to do that, or is this program based on identifying communities that need this much housing?
Right. So good question. The scattered site in Dane County, we actually have looked at it a little bit. It has to be in order to score competitively with WIDA, because when you get these tax credits, you compete, and the competition is fierce. It's every 5 applications for 1 awarded. So you really need to hit all the points. And to be a scattered site that actually qualifies as a scattered site in the WIDA rules and regs, called the Qualified Allocation Plan, you need to be within a mile of everybody, So the problem is, in a more I wouldn't even call Fitchburg a rural community really anymore. It's more probably urban than rural, but it's got some rural in it. That kind of doesn't work probably. That mile radius probably isn't, or diameter is not working anymore. In Milwaukee, it does. However, I think it does work if you were to have a subdivision and you just built all new, for the 225, and you had just, 2 and 3 bedroom homes. That would, because Dane County is one of the most neediest counties in the state in terms of needing affordable housing for workforce. I think even more so, Milwaukee needs it to cure blight and to stabilize neighborhoods. Fitchburg and Dane County need it just to house people that are coming in for jobs. It's such a high growth region. So it could be a different model that you create where if there's some, maybe there's some TIF that you can put in it, where the city, could contribute that way. There's Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, loves these type of projects because it's home ownership in the end. You kind of commit to a home ownership model. They'll give you gap funding. So there's ways where single family homes specifically can outperform other homes product in terms of gap financing, because it really is a model of a community to stabilize it, either in Fitchburg or Milwaukee.
Right. Can we close the presentation so everyone can see each other? I think, unless you're going to show us something on your slides.
I see there was, the funny part about this is I think my assistant sent to Mallory this presentation. I never saw it, but maybe you can scroll through, Brian. I don't know if you can go down there on the second one. Let's see here. Yeah, I think this is just too much here. Keep going. This just shows you the densely populated neighborhood that we're in, which is, not Fitchburg. Why don't you keep going? Kind of same thing there. Yeah, all this is, I think, just kind of, this is a PowerPoint that we had for another purpose. She sent it on. So yeah, that's the home, and that home can be revised to fit kind of a Fitchburg model. It's actually a really nice home, really roomy home, and it can fit any kind of design. And we actually architecturally we design everything in house and build it in-house, so it's pretty flexible product. But I think that's all we need for the presentation there, Olivia.
So what is the square foot of the houses that you're doing in Milwaukee?
1,500. It's like 1,500 to 1,800, depending on the bedroom size. Or a bedroom count, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly an interesting model. God knows that's all we hear is, can we get more affordable single family housing? And one of the things, so, I mean, land costs are obviously a lot different here than they are in Milwaukee. So it would have to be a unique situation. But I mean, I think it's certainly something to consider. Does anybody have any questions other than the ones that we've shared already?
And there's actually, Olivia, I'm going to give you another point that I've heard, which would be an interesting scenario. So there are Dane County funds, that of course go towards affordable housing and act as gap financing. Mm-hmm. None of those have been appropriated for single family homes. Right. So it's always been rantal. And if you want to build wealth, to a lower income type of stratosphere, to me, I think that's a great initiative, either for teacher housing or whatever you'd want to do to kind of target these homes for that type of community. I think Dane County's ready for it, because if you just keep renting, you don't really build the wealth, even if it's affordable. So although you put a roof over your head, which is great, but I think the home still is the greatest American dream of an asset, of someone who owns a home being their largest asset. And I don't think we should, lose sight of that. And I think if Fitchburg was willing, it would be an interesting play to see. And right now, the county is coming up on this funding cycle, which will be due in about July. So if there was any type of opportunity in Fitchburg, now's the time to kind of look through it, spend 30 days, see if we can make it work. The people at the county, if you talk to them and say, hey, you think this works? They'll give you a yay or a nay. They'll say, don't waste your time, or they'll say, yeah, come on in. So I think that's an interesting, especially in Fitchburg, it'd be a very interesting opportunity if we could figure out, of course, the land, but that would be probably the biggest obstacle. But I think you can get funding for it. I think it would be an interesting model.
Thank you. This definitely tees up the presentation, which is next, which is actually the one I'm doing on the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy, where we'll actually be looking at, the county housing fund, as you know, is really geared towards more 60, percent and below
Right.
AMI and some of our most vulnerable residents. But the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy is really going to be looking at something a little bit more broad than that. But before we do that, Joyce, you have your hand up?
I do. Ted, this is Joyce, and I work in economic development for the city. And Mallory and I actually spent some time this afternoon just kind of chatting back and forth. And the city of Fitchburg actually has 3 different opportunity zones where we would totally love to see something like this happen, where we have a high saturation of older quasi affordable housing just because of the age and
Right.
the lack of renovations and that type of thing. We chatted about this because Mike and I have actually talked to a couple of different developers about possibly, buying up some of those lots, doing a tear down and maybe putting up like a townhome project or
Right.
or something like this where we mix up the neighborhood a little bit, get rid of some of the older apartments and actually get some more density. Do you guys have you done anything like that, or is this your own? I think Mallory told me this was your only project that you've done, but it could be a really cool concept in Fitchburg. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, Joyce, I'm glad you bring that up because there's no, there are WIDA limits in terms of the size of a 1-bedroom, the size of something you have to rent, but the house itself, like it could be more of a townhome style. It just like some of our phases, we've done 10 phases in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's the only municipality we've been in, but we've done duplexes and actually condoed the duplex. And so that qualifies for home ownership because each one is a separate legal parcel, even though they're attached. So I think your idea of the land obstacle could maybe be lessened or mitigated in terms of the cost if you had higher density. Because, I can pay some up for the land. It's not like I can't pay anything. But, you have to make sure there's water and sewer. I mean, all that stuff has to be taken into consideration to the parcel. But you can have a higher density where you don't have to have an 18. I mean, these lots are 60 by 120.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need lots like that. I mean, you could have a little smaller lot and have a community park or something across the street and have a little less green space, and everything could work out really well. I think you're right. You could do higher density on that and mitigate that problem.
We'll probably want to talk with you further.
Yeah, I think I've told actually the county, Chuck Hicklin of the county, I've talked to him a lot about this. I said, I think the next phase is this. So the communities around Dane County don't get out of balance with home ownership and rental. Everyone's getting closer. I don't know what Fitchburg is. I'd actually like to know if it's 50-50 or is it 75-25 to homes maybe in Fitchburg. But everyone's getting towards that 50-50. And the kind of the standards, you don't want to go 60-40 rental home because then you've changed your community. So it kind of tilts it the other way,
So we had been at about 50-50, but I think, with the apartment bust and boom here, we're probably about 54 maybe. But when we look at our 2022 annexation of the town of Madison, I believe that's around 500 to 600 units of rental, and maybe I think there was 12 single family, and then there's about 40 condos. So
Yeah.
It's really going to change our dynamics over there too.
Yeah. So, this is really a home ownership program. It's for rental, and you have to have a professional manager rent it for 15 years. But as I said, in the 10th year is where you really see that stabilization and people don't want to move and they call the community home and then buy the home. So.
Marshall, you had a question?
Yeah, and Ted, you started addressing it at the end because that's a long lead in before you get to the home ownership and the management and the annual recertification of the residents and all of that is quite a process. And I was going to ask if you guys maintained ownership of the projects that you're developing and do your own property management, or do you have a third property manager, a third party property manager? How that has played out over the basically 10 to 15 years, and especially the last 5 years, as someone's going, oh, great, I can hang in here. And the other question that I would have is at the end, in that last 5 years, as this person is looking to move from a renter to an owner, are you working with them on coming up with the down payments to be able to qualify for that mortgage that you're going to then have available to them? So, I mean, there's a few other hurdles or steps when you go from that rental period to that ownership period, and how that's playing out since your first one is just coming up. Are people getting the loans that they need?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, actually, you know what you're talking about because you asked all the right questions. So first of all, we design, we build, and manage everything for the whole 15 years. So that's very important because if we didn't do that, that management's a huge piece. It's a huge piece of professionally manage it that can all go south really quick, no matter if you got the 15-year home. So what we're doing in Metcalf Park is we're not replacing, this is 15 years, okay? We're not replacing the roof, okay? But what we are doing is we're using the reserves in like there's an operating reserve and a replacement reserve, and we're taking those and swapping out an appliance package for all those homeowners so they kind of start from scratch so they don't have that huge deferred maintenance. And then, and we are fixing things that are kind of should be, set right for that 15-year period as we go, as we approach this. And we got about 18 months until it comes up. But now to your other question about getting people the loans. That is the struggle, okay? Now, in Fitchburg, I imagine, and I'm just assuming this, I could be wrongfully assuming it, you may have less issues in terms of your creditability to get a loan, okay? I think that probably is safe to say. However, in Milwaukee, that's the biggest struggle. I'd say out of the 30 people we have surveyed, all of them except for 2 want to buy the home. So we have 28 people taking them through WIDA, who is lowering their standard credit score by about 50 points. And then the people, if they have judgments, which is really what kills them, judgments either for traffic or debt collection or whatever, we are counseling them through Lutheran Social Services to pay that out or get a payment plan or whatever. So by the time they get the loan, WIDA will accept them with maybe they have a little higher interest rate. But, when you talk about paying $1,000 per month to paying $350 all in with taxes on a $30,000 mortgage, if you have a 4% or a 5%, that's not going to kill you, even though it may reflect your credit. So that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. And you need that 18-month to 2-year lead time to get everybody ready, or it's not going to work. So we're working with Milwaukee Urban League for that. And I'd probably actually work with Madison Urban League for that.
Okay. All right. Yep. Well, it sounds like you know which ducks are ahead of you, so that's good.
No, it was a great question, Joe.
Excited.
Because the last thing you want to do is the last thing you want to do is in the 15th year put somebody in a hole, So
yeah.
So it's good to have them get a good start.
All right, thanks.
Is Rita coming in with first-time
home
buyer down payment assistance, or what are they coming in with?
They don't need down payment because of the fact that the equity is so large. They have an $80,000 appraisal with a $30,000 loan, so they're good. They don't need a down payment.
So the lenders, what are there specific lenders they're working with, or you're kind of facilitating, or they're on their own to find the actual?
It's WIDA. There's no There's no real, I think we could, with that kind of equity spread, get a retail bank, but just because it's a package deal and WIDA's being a 50-point, doing a 50-point credit favor to us, we're working with WIDA for all of them.
All of them, okay.
Yeah.
Joyce, did you have another question?
Yep, Ted, I just have one other quick question. So, in addition, I think one of the things that I see for some of the workforce housing is that actual educational type element where you teach them how to do the maintenance and things like that. Are you working with anybody who helps provide those kinds of support services, or oh, that's fantastic. Similar to what like a Habitat would do?
Well, it's actually not Habitat, but Lutheran Social Services does that for us. I think Madison Urban League would do that. Milwaukee Urban League does not. The funny thing is Milwaukee Urban League was signed up for it, and then they just never kind of delivered. They just never got the program off. So we went to Lutheran Social Services to do that. But that is extremely important, Joyce, because what we do when we manage the 15 years is we have what's called a contract of care that we place on the residents. And they have to mow their own grass. They have to change their light bulbs, change their furnace filter. And I think there's one other, like trim their bushes and all that. And shovel their snow. So they have to do all of that, or else those costs would just kill us on a scattered site. And so they do all of that. If we have to mow their grass because of ordinance violation, shovel their walk, we charge them like $25, so it hits them hard. And so everyone pretty much complies, which gives them that kind of, I got to take care of my house deal. And then budgeting and fiscal responsibility for paying the taxes and, maintenance that'll come up and having a quote unquote house fund is something that we teach them right now through LSS, which would be the home buyer counseling. But we get them ready in terms of them being a resident in our development as a homeowner with that contract of care, so they know what it's like to take care of their own house.
Do you have a waiting list?
In our scattered site in Milwaukee, it is at 98% occupancy at all times. As you can imagine, we have some eviction issues. And so that's where really the 2% is, but we're always full. There is never a lack of demand for that because that type of product everybody wants. Nobody can find it, probably in Fitchburg too. Nobody can find a house that is affordable. So it's a good demand, yeah. Do you guys have any other questions? I don't want to take up all your agenda.
If someone moves out, like gets evicted and another family moves in, did they just sort of pick up where that lender, that family, left off in terms of the 15 years?
Yeah, Olivia, great question. So when I first started this program, we adopted a invoicing mechanism that was from the Cleveland Housing Network, okay? And Cleveland had this amazing kind of workforce housing thing where it was literally a rent to own. And actually, I think Mallory thought this was a rent to own because that's what Tom Kapp, my predecessor, thought this was going to be. And we started that off. And about 2 years into the program, we had to evict somebody, okay? They weren't paying their rent. We had to evict them. And we go through a mediation. Before they get evicted, we have a third-party mediator come in, so we're not evicting them just because of non-payment of rent. We try to work it out. But anyway, they got evicted. So we're in small claims court. I'm general counsel. I'm literally arguing for Gorman, okay? And the judge looks at the invoice, and he says, I've never seen anything like this. What is this? And I say, Judge, it's a rent-to-own. This person paid mortgage for 2 years, and it shows on the other column the credit they have towards payment of the house, like the equity they built up. Yeah. And he said, and what the claim of the tenant was, they wanted the equity.
Right.
Because, we paid rent for 2 years. We want this back. Yeah. And I'm like, that doesn't work that way. And the judge is like, I get it, Gorman. It doesn't work that way. But tear this up. This is completely confusing. Your
Yeah.
consumers have absolutely no clue what you're doing, so straighten it up. So we canned the program because it was very confusing. It was confusing. And we just went, last person in gets it. So when someone goes, right, that's why in 10 years, nobody moves because they get it. But that's a change we did about 2 years in because it just, and maybe it was that population, I don't know, but it didn't go over well because people didn't understand it. You know, they wanted the money back, but I can't get the money back, you know, from I have a 15-year program I got to rent. So it doesn't really work that way.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Ted, thank you so much. Any last questions for Ted? No. Thank you so
All right.
much. Very interesting.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Mallory, for bringing Ted over.
Thanks, Ted and Mallory.
Thanks, Valerie.
Okay, so I'm going to do a brief presentation. Recently, the Dane County shared a new initiative that we're doing. It's called the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy, and I'm just going to share screen with you here so you can see the presentation. Okay, can you see me while I'm doing this, or am I off?
You're good.
EU.
Okay, great. So, as many of you know, Dane County Housing Initiative and Dane County have been working on, workforce and affordable housing for many years, and we are ready to take the next step with looking at regional housing issues. And so I'm just going to provide a brief background and overview of some housing policy and programs from the county's perspective, some of the highlights of our progress in the last 5 years, and then briefly talk about ongoing need, and then provide a brief overview of the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy that we're hoping to kick off at the end of this year, and a timeline. So as far as the county is concerned, the public policies above are sort of the policies that drive the work that we do. In particular, the Dane County Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 2 of our comprehensive plan is what guides the work that I undertake. And as you can see, there are many programs that we do in the bottom section of this slide: CDBG and home, gap financing, rehab, down payment assistance, homelessness supportive services. And we created a new office in 2020 called the Dane County Housing Access and Affordability Division. But by and large, the Dane County Affordable Housing Fund and the Dane County Housing Initiative have really grown exponentially over the last 5 years. And this is just sort of an overview of the funding that we've given out in the last 5 years. We've helped to create 1,748 new units in all of these communities. Affordable housing for the next 30 years, and provided gap financing of about $23 million. In addition, we have one of the highlights was the Beacon. Last year in 2020, we helped to facilitate federal funding that continues to come and will continue to come with this next round of federal funding, and about $10 million last year, as I said, and then continued the community development block grant program. In the last 5 years, we've Dane County municipalities, there were 3 when we started, were working or engaged in some sort of effort towards creating workforce and affordable housing, and now we have 10. So we've added, there are 7 new communities that have started to work in affordable and workforce housing, and I've had, there are probably about 3 more that are actually in serious conversation about wanting to take some next steps with workforce and affordable housing. Of course, there is, there's an ongoing burden that, we continue to face. The housing shortage is fairly significant and deep. And here's some statistics for those of you who have not seen the Dane County Housing Needs Assessment report. But in 2019, we had 21,000, or from the 2019 report numbers, we had 21,465 renters and owners that were paying more than 50% of their income on housing. And if you look at the Dane County and City of Madison Affordable Housing Funds together, they created 578 units, helped to create 578 units in 2019. But if you consider the gap that we have of 15,400 renters alone, it's going to take 26.6 years to fill, to close that housing gap for renters who are paying more than 50% of their income on rent. And that doesn't even include the household growth. We're going to add another 40,000 households over the next 20 years. So that would probably be, if you stretched the number of units we need evenly over the next 20 years, that'd be another 400 units a year. And unfortunately, we do continue to see homeless youth and children in the Dane County School District's. DPI's latest statistics are about 1,865. So this is just an historical slide to kind of give some perspective on the home to income, the income to home price ratio. And around in 1965, we were looking at a home to income price ratio of about 1 to 3. Now we're looking at a home to income price ratio of about 1 to 4.6.7. So obviously prices have, as a percentage of income, have really, considerably gone up. So the work that we're doing, the work that many municipalities have done, the number of municipalities that have engaged in this work and continue to engage in this work has really, as well as the stark issues that have been brought about by the COVID and the housing crisis with COVID, has really, pushed us to take this next step. The regional, doing a regional housing study has been on the Dane County Housing Initiative horizon for a number of years, but this is really feels like the best time, and we really want to capture the momentum and the interest and the expertise of the regional network of stakeholders, and engage stakeholders across municipalities, interest groups, sectors of private and public sectors to create a shared understanding of the existing conditions and trends. Many communities are working on this issue. In particular, Fitchburg is definitely one of the leaders. But this does allow us to engender collaboration in a way that we haven't before, and create new partnerships and opportunities, leverage the existing resources and the expertise we have, and build on existing efforts. So more broadly, it will provide an opportunity to create a comprehensive assessment and identify key priorities that we think we can work on together that we might not necessarily be able to look at or understand or work on alone. So who are the participants in the regional housing strategy? That would be the cities, towns, and villages. And it's important to note that each community does have very specific needs and capacity and interest in this issue. Obviously, a town is a lot different than a city or a village in terms of their work. We want to take kind of a systems approach to this. It's one thing to look at sort of an individual unit and how we can get a unit of housing, but there are other factors. There are other really important factors to understanding the supply and demand. And in particular, we want to take a look at housing instability and some of the factors that compound housing instability. We want to review and evaluate those through case studies and other research. And that's in particular because lower income folks have a higher cost of living, a higher percentage of cost of living than folks who are not lower income. And so looking at things like transportation, access to jobs and services, access to childcare, those kinds of things are really going to be important to look at. And of course, many municipalities are concerned with larger issues, and the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy has the opportunity to bring a lens, whether it's looking at housing community development from a perspective of climate change or racial disparities. It has an opportunity to look at these larger issues and the intersection with housing. And then the strategy is really going to focus on residents who are 60% AMI and below, but up to 80%, and then are most vulnerable, and then the missing middle, which is 80 to 120% AMI. This is sort of a broad brush of the components of the regional housing strategy itself, looking at who we are, demographics analysis, culture, race, ethnicity, age, and age. And I think it's really important to begin, this initiative really looking at who we are and to sort of ground ourselves in this sort of more of an understanding of our regional identity and what we share. the assets and the resources that we share. Looking at a housing needs assessment, but much more detailed than we're getting in that we've been getting in the housing needs assessment. So looking at more specific demographics, a market study, and a comprehensive inventory of countywide policies, codes, partnerships, and programs, and then share our best practices, and using all of these to guide the recommendations that come out of the strategy. So it's going to be a very highly facilitated process and interactive, broad-based and inclusive advisory team from around the region to ensure representative, regional representation, comprehensive inclusive community engagement, and a project team to help support and facilitate the scope and serve as ambassadors for the regional housing strategy and facilitation. So here's just an example of some of the outcomes that we might see with the regional housing strategy. Obviously, an interest in working together across, municipalities and agencies and organizations, and developing shared identities or shared goals or priorities. For example, we might decide to, the steering committee might decide to set a goal of rehab. Obviously, rehab is one of the most significant areas of affordable housing that we have. It's 60% of all existing affordable housing, so that's an area of opportunity. The committee might want to create, a goal of increasing affordable workforce housing by, say, 10%. Maybe they'd like to identify, maybe some recommendations to identify new funding and investment priorities for, to help equalize opportunities and resources for Dane County housing residents of color. And overall, maybe new housing opportunities for towns identified, such as accessory dwelling units or farm worker housing, as one part of the solution to the housing shortage. I think there's an interest in probably creating, some sort of a metrics or a dashboard, so we can benchmark and evaluate current progress and progress on identified regional strategies, and come up with a comprehensive toolkit and best practices. So among other things, of course. But this is sort of a brief timeline. Right now, I've started to engage in stakeholder outreach to identify potential partner sponsors, and then I'm going to work with county folks and probably reach out to some regional folks so we can put together a project team that will help refine the scope this summer and the budget and develop the RFP and issue the RFP. It's really important that we ground this work, the regional housing strategy, from the beginning with regional representatives. So I will probably be reaching out to someone in Fitchburg, for example, to help shape the scope and the work going forward. ID Advisory Committee, and develop a website and communications in August, and then November is our kind of target for kicking off the meeting, the strategy effort, and then potentially 8 meetings ending in June 2022. So that's just it in a snapshot overview. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Olivia, would you mind sending that to me?
Sure.
Then that way I can send it out to the committee so everybody has
Sure.
a copy of that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. No questions? If we don't have any questions, then we can move forward. Shall we move forward? Okay. We have reports from departments. Joyce, I think you're up.
Sure. What's listed there? I don't have a copy of the agenda here, so.
We have the ADU update, and I will confess I didn't have time to look at that memo that Sonia sent out or that you guys sent out because I didn't have time to look at that. But then Alder engagement, and then Affordable Housing Endowment Pilot Program.
Okay, I guess we'll start with the ADUs. So it was requested at the last meeting that we just kind of take a look at our peer communities and see what their ordinance says in regards to ADUs. So I worked with Sonia, so I apologize. I kind of got ahead of the schedule and put together that quick memo before she actually had a chance to look at it. But I will report that 2 of our peer communities, being Sun Prairie and Verona, neither one of those communities have ADUs in their zoning ordinance. Verona is actually rewriting their ordinance, and there is language included in that. But we'll see how things go when it works its way through the public hearing process. So once it's actually, I think Friday is when they told me that they're going to actually put it out for public view. At that time, I'll share share with you the draft, and then you guys can take a look and see what it says in there as far as ADUs. And then I also talked to someone in Sun Prairie, which they have language in their comprehensive plan that talks about ADUs. However, they don't have it in their zoning ordinance. And so we just chit-chat a little bit about it. One of the things that they mentioned to me that they had concerns with is actual enforcement, as far as where we have the dependent living assistant language in our code. They wanted to know how we would enforce that. They thought that that could be a challenge. And I did mention that, most of our zoning enforcement is done on a complaint basis. So, I think it would be that we'd probably need to have somebody tell us that someone's living in there that actually isn't providing the services that's outlined in our code. And then I believe that Middleton, there's a lot of similarities between our code and their code. And, theirs as well is a conditional use permit. And I don't believe that they have the dependent living requirement. So based upon the research that I did, I felt like we were kind of progressive in that we've already kind of addressed, the use of an ADU. So that's my report on the ADUs. Do you have any questions for me? Anyone? Oh, looks like Dorothy does. Go ahead, Dorothy.
As soon as I unmute. This started out as us supposed to make a recommendation to council. Is it no longer on the table for us to make a recommendation on it?
So, Dorothy, kind of the way that this committee works is you advise to the Plan Commission and to CETA. So what my plan was is, as Jennifer and I have been doing, we've been taking this stuff back to CETA. So I believe that this will go on a CETA agenda, and then we'll get feedback from them as to how they want to move this forward. Is that your understanding too, Jennifer?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So I think that's where we're at right now, is advisory to CETA and the Plan Commission and Council ultimately. So like I said, we'll report this back to CETA and we'll see where they'd like to take it next.
So for my clarification, so you providing this committee information or this task force information is, at least on this subject, is something that, we're just supposed to read it and hear the update. We're not, I'm just a little confused. We're not supposed to share an opinion on what our.
Oh, absolutely not. I believe that if you look at the minutes,
Right.
We actually have a lot of information in there and feedback that we received from you guys that we'll be sharing that information with CETA. And then, they'll be able to say, because this group is advisory, we'll share your information and feedback with CETA, and then they can take it to the next level. Just as we did like with the memo, you guys instructed us as to what we needed to do, and then we moved it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Marshall.
So one question I have about the accessory dwelling units is, this is fine. You've got the limitations on how they can be used and when they can be built, but someone sells their house. They've got basically a little rental unit in there. I mean, how is that being addressed and handled moving forward?
So if you know how a conditional use permit, it lasts as long as that use is in there. So if someone was to sell the house, my understanding is they would have to reapply for a conditional use.
Okay, and the realtor would make the potential owners aware of this? I'm just kind of,
They
they should, okay, so.
yeah, I mean,
Notify the
as they should with any kind of zoning issue or any type of outstanding issue. And I would suggest that they, have their client reach out directly to the city if it's a case like that.
And have we had any units built and or sold?
I think when I think in Smart Code it's permitted, and in our other zoning districts it's a conditional use permit. And I believe that Sonia said that she had one inquiry in her time here with the city, and I don't know if that moved forward or not.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Dorothy?
I think the big question is, when you have a little independent living thing set up that someone could use, which the conditional use is based on a dependency clause, but now you do not have a need for that dependency. Are you forced then to let that stand empty, or can you use it differently than the original?
No, because the zoning ordinance says that you have to have that relationship. So you wouldn't be able to do that unless you had that relationship. That's my understanding, but I'm not an attorney nor a planner, but that's my interpretation of what she told us when she met with us. And I believe it says it in her. So she also included with her follow-up to my memo, another kind of PowerPoint that goes through the ADUs again with the comparison between Smart Code and conventional Euclidean zoning. So you could take a look at that too, Dorothy.
Mm-hmm. I would fear for allowing someone to build a separate little apartment-like thing that in the future would force to be empty space. I would think that is something that should be changed.
Once again, that's more of a policy decision, and at this level, it's not something that I don't think that we have the power to say yes or no. I mean, I would think, and Sonia and I actually discussed this in pretty great detail as far as even, our approach in moving forward. And we don't want to make problems where right now there are none, if that makes sense as well. So I think based upon the research that I did, as far as looking at our other peer communities, I felt like we were progressive in what we even allowing that. If we have to fine tune it, I think, we need to. Sonia, it makes a lot of her decisions based upon data. And right now there isn't the data out there that's warranting changes to the ordinance or so I guess at this point, I probably should shut up and just leave it as as we'll take it to the next committee and see what they have to say.
I feel like just at this point, like since we just got that update from you and we didn't have the, the opportunity that you had to talk to the other communities about what they're doing, and I'm not looking at a side-by-side comparison. I feel like it's a little preliminary for us to, finalize this conversation with the committee. I feel like it might be helpful for us to actually be able to ask more questions. And I mean, I don't think we need to make a policy recommendation, but I feel like, because overall, what is the context of consideration that we're engaged in here? Is it, is ours good enough? Is Fitchburg's good enough? Is it, do we want to, are we trying to, make it more accessible, in terms of easily done? And if we are, then I feel like we need to have something a little bit more systematic in terms of evaluation. And it is such a new thing, or it's such an untried thing, that we're not going to be looking at it like we would look at other, zoning decisions, because we don't have all the, comparables. And I know that we're not a policy making committee, but I feel like it's a little rushed because we just got that memo from you guys, and we're not, able to, I'm sorry, I just wasn't able to read it before the meeting. So,
Right, and that's fine too. I mean, we can table it, or, bring it back just if there's an additional comments for our next meeting.
Yeah.
And before we pass it on to Sita, that's fine too. Because I think she did a pretty good job of laying out the differences between the other communities and Fitchburg. And then I also had a little conversation with Jason Valerius too, who's with MSA, who actually worked on the documentation. And I wanted to make sure that I understood what was actually in the plan. If they're truly recommendations or considerations, because I think there's a big difference. And Jason said, what's in the plans are considerations, and we really need to figure out what works best for Fitchburg, versus, is this something that's we need, and then we should move forward. And if it's something that we feel comfortable with, if we feel comfortable with what we have now, then, we should move forward. So I would just suggest that you take a look at what she put together, and we can bring it back one more time for discussion.
I think we should, just because it would be better to make sure everyone's had a chance to look at it and thought about it, so we don't have to, come back to it and make.
And I would actually review the minutes too, because, we made sure that those were pretty detailed as far as, what all the things that we talked about, and all the input from everyone.
And I just remember Godwin wanting more information, and
Yep. And I wanted to make sure that we took a look at, because I looked through my notes too, and it said our peer communities. So I did take a look at the ones that we always go to.
Well, I'm sorry if I'm making more trouble for everybody. I just have
It's not a problem. You want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the decisions to make. So
and just not right. So Brian, you had your hand up at one point. Are you have any? You're good. Okay. Dorothy.
And then one of my concerns / considerations is that we only meet quarterly, which means that we end up slowing things down. And I would like to avoid that. I think we've been talking about this. We talked about it in one meeting, and then we talked about it in the last meeting, and we're talking about it again and suggesting talking about it in the next meeting. That's a full year.
Well, once again, Dorothy, as I explained, it's a policy decision. And when we appeared at the committee of the whole, that's when we were hoping to have some of these things kind of hashed out. And I believe that if you as an alder feel strongly about this, then maybe you want to move it forward, because that was kind of my impression of having an alder on the committee to bring some of these things forward. When you report out at the committee after we meet, maybe that's something you want to ask is, you know, we've been struggling with this for a little bit. You know, is it something that we should pursue and get the council's feedback? Because I guess based on what I've read and seen and what our ordinance says, I think we're doing a good job there. As far as we already have a mechanism to do it. And as we get more data and more requests, that's when maybe we need to refine our ordinance.
Oh, one of my big concerns is the discrepancy between the Euclidean version and the smart code version. I would like, if nothing else, for those to match somewhat better. We might end up defining the difference between adding ADUs in existing neighborhoods compared to in new developments. I don't think that that's represented, and I think that that's where a lot of the issue and concerns would come from when people say, I don't want that in my backyard, literally. Where in a brand new development, even if it was in traditional zoning, if it were allowed as a permitted, then you wouldn't have that problem. So that adds another element of depth to the whole question for me.
So I just want to go back to the comment that you made, Dorothy, about the time that it's taking. And I do realize and I recognize that it is very time consuming, but changing zoning or making recommendations about zoning is a really kind of a significant thing.
Mhm.
So I don't, I don't have a problem with us revisiting it again. And I also don't have a problem with, eventually saying, if it's this meeting or next meeting saying, okay, we're done with this conversation for now, but it's not like any of these, issues go away permanently because it's the zoning code and it's, so I think that we could revisit it, I mean, we might talk again next time in 3 months and have a recommendation, that we'd like to put forward. And then in 2 years from now, when we're meeting, we might be like, these communities are doing this other thing, and this is actually, turning out to be something that, could make a dent in our housing shortage. So we want to try and make this, we want to proliferate it. So in 2 years from now, we revisit it again. So I do think that, it's ongoing and iterative. And so, but I do sense appreciate your frustration and that it has been, if we go look at it next time, it's going to be a year, but
I've actually been talking in the planning department for a number of years now about this.
Right. So it seems to me that maybe at least at this iteration, unless we're holding some other major policy decisions up and with CETA or the council, maybe that we could just revisit it again for, at least this time around for one last time. And then maybe have a discussion offline and what the questions we actually need to answer are at our next meeting. And if we can come to a conclusion as a committee that there's something that we'd like to say, we like this or we would prefer this, obviously we don't make policy decisions, but, so it's on record that we've thought about it and here are the things, in addition to what's already done. And I really appreciate the notes. They're very thorough. But I just didn't have time to read all about your most recent.
Okay, so I'll just leave a note to have that on our next agenda, and we've got 5 minutes here, so I want to make good use of our time here. As far as the alder engagement, you have the language that that Sonia is kind of proposing for the development guide, and if you have any feedback, feel free to share that with me. I am also working on, we have 2 different things. So we have the development guide that goes out to the development community, But then we also have an Alder handbook. And I told Sonia that I was actually gonna kind of work on some language for the Alder handbook, since I was involved with the housing discussions with the development community, and I think I understand a little bit better than Sonia does as far as what their concerns are and what they actually would like to see from the alders. So that is a separate kind of document. And I will be working on that, and I'll put together some information, and I'll share that with you guys as well. If you remember, there was kind of some confusion as to why this even ended up in the housing plan. And the background was, this was a request from the development community as far as getting better support from the alders in the district and having them have a better understanding of the project that's being proposed and being more active in the neighborhood meeting. And Sonia and I have had some discussions on that too, some of the challenges that she's had. So we're going to work on that as well.
One thing that I'd like to see addressed as part of that, Joyce, is what happens when alders oppose a project being considered. How do they handle it? Because I think that was an issue that was part of this discussion.
Well, we talked about coming up with what we consider the best practices, and that's what we plan to include versus a policy. So it'll be best practices. All right.
Moving on.
And then the last thing that I want to quick report on is we have engaged the services of HNA advisors to start working on our townhouse project. We are meeting tomorrow to have our first preliminary meeting. So just wanted to let you know that that's underway. So I'll have probably some more things to report when we meet again.
Do you have a location in mind?
Mike and I have identified one that we are going to maybe have them use as kind of the pilot and just see where the numbers fall. And I don't know, Brian, are you going to be working with them on that as well?
One meeting about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, just to kind of talk about some preliminary costs and land costs. So they had kind of refreshed data because some of the information they had was a little bit older. So they were going to start kind of drafting some initial stuff and trying to rework their formula to see how it would work out as far as, you know, the median income percentage, et cetera. And I haven't seen anything from that yet. So not that I'm on that group, but I just kind of gave them some updated information.
Great.
Dorothy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have a council meeting tomorrow that I'll be reporting out of this meeting about. Is there something that I should or should not say about this item when I report out tomorrow?
Which item are you talking about?
The HNI or HNA advisors and the meeting that you're planning on having tomorrow.
You can just report that we've started the engagement process with them to, you know, start working on the project. So since I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask if you could pop into the meeting tomorrow night, but that's not necessary.
Mike will be there. So, and he's going to be on the Zoom meeting. At least that's the plan right now, unless something else changes. And in the event that he isn't going to be able to make it, I told them that I would be canceling the meeting because I don't feel comfortable doing it on my own. So, and then one other quick announcement. So, Mallory and I had a conversation this afternoon as well as tapping Gary's expertise as well, and maybe having him appear at our next meeting just to talk about his experience with Fitchburg Springs, and then also discussing just some kind of years of experience and things that he sees that could work in Fitchburg, and possibly some observations as far as from the development of affordable housing, and maybe give us some best practices and some other insight into affordable housing. Do you have anything else to share, Mallory?
I was thinking some of the things that they've done recently with workforce housing, because that's been a big drive in communities that they've been working in, specifically Colorado and Arizona. So if there's an interest, can have him talk about some of the product that they've produced along those ends. I think there's been a big push for workforce housing, and we've been getting involved in that. Or I personally am not involved in it. He's involved in that. So, but yeah. So if there's an interest, I'd be more than happy to have him come and speak about what they've done as of late.
That would be great to hear about that. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
We
all.
to hear about what they're doing in Colorado and Arizona. I mean, just because it's not here doesn't mean that,
Right.
Right.
And they're doing it in Florida and Illinois, Wisconsin. So there's other markets that we're involved in, and actually Arkansas as well, and some in Ohio. So might be interesting to just kind of get an overview of some of that, the new housing initiatives that he's been involved in.
Yeah, very much so.
Have people been working on any kind of co-housing things?
I don't know that they have, but that doesn't mean that they aren't. I mean, we're doing development in like 7 states now, so there could be.
That could be another option that we could consider at some point.
Sure. And in Colorado, I mean, co-housing from the perspective of they're doing some for Vail Resorts needs housing for their workers. And some of that housing is, I would describe it as co-housing. I'm not sure you would, but there's a common area with multiple bedrooms around that common area, kind of a dorm type of setup, because that works for that community. So if you would call that co-housing, I know that they're doing that in Colorado. And that's for the lift operators and those people that are working in the ski resort industry. But you could ask him that question yourself and see what other product there might be.
It might be interesting just to hear about that, because maybe some aspect of that is transferable to,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, it might be interesting to hear about that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else? Joyce, do you have any other updates?
Nope, I think I pretty much have gone over my time here, so by 4 minutes for sure.
Oops. Do we have a motion to, is everybody else okay? Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Who
you
gave
so
me
much.
the second? Was that Brian McKee or Brian Schimming?
Well, I was one. I think I heard
Jennifer and
something else.
Dorothy, I think, were 1 and 2.
Okay. It sounded like a male. Sorry, Dorothy. Maybe it was your lower voice.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for the great meeting and the great minutes. And Mallory, thanks for bringing Ted. That was really interesting.
Yeah, that was great.
That was really terrific information. So
Good. Okay.
And thanks always to Fact TV. They do
Thank
a
you.
wonderful job.
great. Thank you so much.